I want to welcome all of you today. My name is Lissa Muscatine. I'm one of the co-owners of Politics and Prose, along with my husband, Brad Graham, who's over there. And on behalf of our staff, we welcome all of you. And how appropriate that we're here on Mother's Day. After all, we are here to celebrate the legacy of Carla Cohen. And she, of course, is the mother of Politics and Prose. And we are all, I think, in one way or another, her children. So it's just a nice coincidence to have this on Mother's Day. I also want to mention that on this Mother's Day, her own mother, Edith, is here. Thank you so much for coming. And we know that Carla, in addition to being the mother of Politics and Prose, was also the mother of actual children. Unfortunately, Eve could not be here, but she is very much here in spirit. Aaron is here, and hey, Aaron, there you are. His wife Nina, Carla's grandchildren, and David's Ryan, Georgia are here, and Carla's sister Ellie, her brothers Mark and Frank are here up front. So you can say hello to all of them. And by the way, just as a small aside, although Mark is not a mother, he did just have a baby. His baby is a wonderful new bread store and delicatessen, and I don't know how else I should describe it, but it's called Bread First. It's down near Van Ness, so check out his new offspring on this Mother's Day. So you come close to being a mother. It's kind of the same thing. And then lastly, I just would like to introduce Barbara Mead, who's right here, who most of you know. I think all of you probably know. And of course, who might as well have been married to Carla in one way or another, was married to Carla in one way or another, and the person who was really married to Carla, David Cohen. And for me and Brad, one of the greatest joys and honors and opportunities for us in the almost 3 years now that we've, since we assumed stewardship of Politics and Prose, has been to have Barbara and David as our mentors. And I am not exaggerating to say that they have been generous, kind, patient, and wise, and just always available to provide counsel, to be sounding boards, to help kind of keep us from burning the place down, and just to be such important teachers as we've tried to do justice by this store and by Carla moving ahead. And so it's with great pleasure that we have supported and been excited about this prize today in Carla's name. When David first mentioned it to us some time ago, we thought it was a wonderful idea. We're sure that you all do too, and that's why you're here. We're really thrilled at the authors who've been selected as the first recipients of the Carla Cohen Prize, which of course David will talk more about. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you, David, so much for helping us out so much, and Barbara too. And it's an honor to be here with all of you. So please join me in welcoming David Cohen.
Thank you so much, Lissa. This is obviously a special occasion, and it's an auspicious one for our whole family, my nuclear family, my extended family, and me. And I hope I got it right with the sociologist looking down on me. This prize, is awarded to an outstanding first or second book in each category, and each book is a book of singular achievement. And later on in our program, we'll hear from our authors, and after the ceremony is over, they will sign books. And you can just line up as we always do, but there'll be two signers. And I'm going to explain more about the prize later. But first, I want to really recognize those who made this event happen. So please indulge me. I have a lot of public thanks to give. And unlike Hollywood, I am not going to thank God or Harvey Weinstein. Carla's family's been introduced, and there's also a bevy of nephews and nieces here, and spouses, Nina Segre, Mike Carroll, and Bread First. And in 9 days, we will celebrate Edith's 104th birthday. So I want to thank Nick Price, who is videoing this event. And what it means is that there'll be links. You can watch it on YouTube. It'll be on the website. There'll be a lot of choices. And this is always wonderful when Politics and Prose does this. And it means that people who can't be here, like my daughter, who is celebrating her 11th anniversary on May 11th on a Sunday, which is the only time it's going to happen, on the same day she got married, I urged her to be with her husband, Richard, who could not be here for professional reasons. I want to thank Sarah Beline, the Politics and Prose events coordinator, who's been always wonderful to work with. When Barbara and I still introduce books, she makes it easy, but she's really made it easy on this big occasion. And the whole team at Politics and Prose is just absolutely marvelous and spirited, and it recognizes the fantastic job that Lissa and Brad have done. I want to thank Lissa and Brad because they were there from the beginning with useful advice and really thinking through how Politics and Prose could be of practical help, provide its support, and really be connected with this prize. So many, many thanks. There's a wonderful blog that Bread First puts out, authored by my brother-in-law, Mark. And on opening day, he explained why he created Bread First. And Carla was part of that. And the key thing was helping create a legacy in a community after she was gone. And Mark pointed out that that was a wonderful creation. But he also said something that's very right and apt and true, which is that it's even better now. And that is really a tribute to your leadership, Lissa and Brad. I want to thank Louise Weiner and Sally Craig for practical advice to a guy who was out of his element on a lot of things. And some great pro bono work by Maggie Richards of Henry Holt and Elizabeth Shreve, who really helped penetrate both the publishers and found ways to give this prize a public face and a public presence. We're a 501c3. You all as contributors know that. And that means we have a board. But this is not a passive board. Each of them has contributed writing, editing, ideas. They gave us shape and direction. And when I call their names, I would like them to stand so you can see them. Betsy Levin, Burl Radin. Stay standing, Betsy. You can do it. Ann Shields, Aaron Cohen. And Aaron, you should know, when Carla was diagnosed, Aaron immediately had the idea there should be a literary prize. He's a big idea guy, so he said, you can figure out the details. and the fact is that it took a lot of effort to figure out the details, and there was a lot of discussion that included the board members, included Lissa and Brad, and included many other people. But I'm very thankful that he suggested this. Carla knew that there would be a prize, and she knew, and she had the confidence that it would be done in a way that would reflect her passions and values. And she didn't have to know the details on that, but she really knew that it would reflect her passion and values. I want to thank our jurors. We developed a system of independent jurors. We were very firm about no board vetoes, no family vetoes. We really did follow a separation of state and church. And I don't know who was who here, but that doesn't matter. And I would like the jurors to stand when I call their name. Our fiction jurors are Barbara Mead, Mark Laframboise, Howard Norman. Howard has just published a new novel. Next week. This is ahead of the game. It's okay. Our nonfiction jurors were Darcy Bacon, John Gompertz, and Rick Atkinson, who couldn't be here because he's working on another book, and he's traveling. But Rick, the Independents had a brilliant idea a year ago, and created the independent bookstores created a book called My Bookstore, in which the independent bookstores asked one writer to write about their favorite bookstore. And Brad and Lissa asked Rick, it was really appropriate, to write about politics and prose. And while I don't believe in reading too much, I can't resist. In keeping with the owner's concept of a bookshop as both a community center and a tabernacle of ideas, Politics and Prose had been among the first stores in Washington to sponsor author events, nurturing personal and usually amiable conversations between writers and readers. And he goes on to say, soon every night of the calendar was booked with events along with many afternoons. For each author given the podium at P&P, whether a Nobel laureate or a first-time local novelist, 3 or 4 others were necessarily turned down. For writers like me who have been lucky enough to speak at the bookstore repeatedly, the counter with an inquisitive, meddlesome audience can be revelatory, deepening an author's understanding of his own work and giving new meaning to that old aphorism, I write so I know what I think. So Rick is here very much. Now, a word about the prize. What looks self-evident takes lots of discussion and testing ideas and modifying it. Carla championed newer book writers. And what made this unusual and original was to include both first or second books. That is what we have today, a first novel, a second nonfiction book. And that addition of first and second books really makes this an original kind of prize. And it was Howard Norman who suggested the second book. And of course, I misunderstood Howard. And as a typical liberal, I believe in addition, so I said first and second instead of just second. But it is, I'm glad we did what we did, and it was one of those things, as in Yiddish we say bashert, it was just foreordained in the heavens to come out the way it should. So we also wanted politics and prose involved. And no better way to recognize its influence in identifying books worth reading is through the Politics and Prose summer newsletter and Christmas newsletters. So these are books that are vetted by the staff, by Lissa and Brad and others who know about books and vet their quality. And with a staff that has leadership in the book selling community, and in the book publishing and in the book editing community, with people like Mark Laframboise, you really have a high quality review standard. So that was a very important part of this. Now, Carla and Barbara built a community institution. And that's why we added to include books to consider one criterion which comes from the Washington Post notable books. So that enlarges the audience, but still keeps it manageable. It still has to be first or second books, but there are some books that the Post thought was notable that Politics and Prose didn't mention, and that too was added, and that makes it a community effort. So that's the purpose of the prize. And the jury, which really had to work these things through, found a very good working principle. Would the book be thrust into a customer's hands by Carla? That was the operating principle. If it did that, then it was above the line. So that's our prize: newer writers, politics and prose, community. It's a perfect hat trick. So I want to turn to the awards now, and we're going to start with fiction, and Barbara Mead is going to make the fiction award, and Barbara and Carla, as Lissa said, had a 25 years plus marriage. They complemented each other, and Barbara drew the perfect description of what the two of them were together. I will let her explain the cat and dog, but you can figure out who was who. And this remarkable partnership was grounded in a love of reading, a love of good literature, and a provision for ideas, and a passion for ideas that are in books. Barbara Mead will make the presentation to Anthony Marra, also known as Tony. Barbara?
Well, this is a very special occasion for me, and also I'm standing here with our author sitting right here in the first row, which was very convenient for me. So first of all, I should tell you something about our winner, Tony Marra. As far as I can figure out, Tony got his first recognition about 5 years ago in 2009 for a short story that he wrote called Chechnya. That he wrote for Narrative magazine. And then he went on to win the Whiting Award, the Pushcart Prize, and the Pushcart Prize for that story. And then it turned out that that story that won so much, it was only a seedling. It went on and grew into a big oak, which became a constellation, a vital phenomenon, which then went on and won its own awards. Certainly, one of its first recognitions was the Carla Furstenberg Cohen Award. I have to point out that we voted for a constellation before the National Book Circle's John Leonard Prize. We were there first. In addition, Tony's been anthologized in the Best American Non-Required Reading for 2012. Tony went to Landon here. He graduated from USC. Received his MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop, and then went on to be a Stegner Fellow at Stanford University, where he now teaches. He also teaches now there as the Jones Lecturer in Fiction. As far as I can figure out, Tony, the Jones Lecturer is kind of a postdoc Stegner Fellowship. Is that right? Okay, so that's. We had a 3-person jury, as David said, and we were unanimous in the selection of this book as the winner of the first Carla Furstenberg Cohen Award. There's no way that I can describe my feeling that there was some magical fusion operating in the atmosphere when we chose Tony's novel. It was not until after our vote that I discovered that Tony's storytelling skills had been finally honed by his childhood reading of books that his mother had bought at the Cheshire Cat, the children's bookstore right up Connecticut. I should also say that Tony was born the same year Politics and Prose was, in 1984. That was the beginning of that magic fusion. But anyway, as I said, his childhood was fostered by the Cheshire Cat. when the Cheshire Cat closed and moved up here. The Marra family then came and were our customers here. I did not know that. I did not know the family. I did not know that they were our customers. It was in this, then between his, Tony took a gap year between his year, graduating from Landon in USC and going to USC, where he worked at the UPS store in Chevy Chase, and he also, for the first time, took a course in writing at the Bethesda Writing Center. And it was over the counter when he was working at the UPS store, this is what I just learned several months ago, that Tony met his first author, Howard Norman, sitting right over here, who had been recently nominated for the National Book Award for his novel, Bird Artist. Tony was so impressed that he had met an author that he went out and bought Howard's book right away. And it was that summer that Tony started writing his first fiction. And of course, there was no way that Tony would know at that time that 10 years later, Howard would be one of the three-person jury choosing his novel as the first winner of the Carla Furstenberg Cohen Prize. I was then just flabbergasted after we made our selection to discover that Tony had been a Stegner Fellow at Stanford. This is a fellowship that is named after Wallace Stegner, who founded Stanford's first creative writing program. In 1985, almost 30 years ago, Wallace Stegner's publisher, I think at that time it was Penguin, invited Carla to a luncheon for Wallace Stegner at the American Booksellers Convention in San Francisco. And she and Wally, as we knew him as, just immediately bonded. Carla, even before she met him, was completely sure that Angle of Repose was the best novel that had ever been written, and actually she died thinking that same thing. So after their meeting in San Francisco, Carla invited Wally to come read From Crossing to Safety here at the store. And it turned out to be the largest audience that we had ever had up until that point. And then at Carla's invitation, Wallace Stegner came a couple of more times to sit around informally in a circle with the booksellers who were working here at Politics and Prose and talk about writing. I mean, it was just a thrilling experience for our booksellers who were working here. And then after he died, Mary Stegner, his widow, wrote to Carla about how much that Wally had admired her. And it was a very, very touching letter. And Carla, I know, would just be absolutely thrilled to know that we had chosen somebody who was a Stegner Fellow. It was several months after we made our selection that I read a early novel by Tolstoy, Haji Murad, which actually Tony talks about in his book. And he uses as a epitaph in this book, he takes the last two lines from Haji Murad. This was a novel that was written by Tolstoy around 1900, but takes place in Chechnya around the 1850s. And it was after reading this novel, I just came to understand why I was just so attracted to Tony's novel. Haji Murad has got to be regarded as one of Tolstoy's finest novels, and in reading it, I marveled at what a skilled master Tony is in caressing the details, what Nabokov called the divine details that he praised Tolstoy for. Of course, that there was one major difference, and that is Tolstoy had visited Chechnya and served in the army in the Caucasus, and Tony had never set foot in the country when he wrote this book. It really is a testament to the powers of his imagination. And I was just mesmerized by Tony's ability to write such an imaginative story filled with violence and betrayal, but with complete empathy for his characters, who live in a lawless world where good people commit bad betrayals. And when trapped by circumstances of genealogy, geography, and ancestral hatreds, they have a plight that left me finishing the novel saying, Lord, have mercy upon them, and have mercy upon us also. So it's a beautiful book, as Ron Charles said in his review. At the risk of raising your expectations too high, I have to say you simply must read this book. So thank you, Tony, so much for your novel.
Tony, in addition to the cash award, which was sent long ago, there is a certificate that goes with this. And this is drawn from what Barbara wrote me when she told me that the jury had selected you, Tony. This is what Barbara wrote. Anthony Marra's novel, A Constellation of Vital Phenomena, is a complex, carefully constructed tale of resilience, moral ambivalence, and the contingency of courage, with the seemingly simple building blocks of stories of personal lives and a fight for survival in war-torn Chechnya at the end of the 20th century. With remarkable shifting perspectives, Anthony Marra succeeds in transforming ordinary lives in the obscure, predominantly Muslim region of Chechnya, one deeply scarred by brutal religious, ethnic, and political hostilities, into a spellbinding tale of beauty without boundaries. I'll sign it later.
You should talk now. Thank you so much, David and Barbara and Mark and Howard. This is just an incredible honor, and I'm deeply humbled to be alongside David Finkel in being recognized as the one of the inaugural recipients. I didn't know Carla well. I saw her in passing often in that chair at author events. I remember when I was in high school, I came to see a novelist of large reputation, and he received a question from the audience and sort of gave this glib answer, and she sort of said, "Hold on," and made him answer it honestly. Which now that I'm on the other side of the podium, I think I'd be terrified to. But I was. I came to life a couple months after Politics and Prose in 1984, and I feel like my life has been entwined with it in so many ways. This has been a place that since leaving DC I return to every time I'm home. It's just become this ritual, this part of coming back. And when I first began thinking of the novel, I did so with the idea of wanting to write a book that would be on the bookshelves in Politics and Prose. That the idea that I wanted to write the kind of novel that the booksellers here, whose opinions and judgment I've benefited from over the years and have come to sort of see as the gold standard of what good literature is. That a book that would pass muster with them was pretty much as high an honor as I could hope for. And I first began thinking about this project when I was home one summer. It was shortly after I graduated college, and in college I had studied in Russia, and I lived down the street from a metro station that had become a gathering point for Russian veterans of the Chechen wars, and they were just a couple years older than me, and they would congregate every day in their military uniforms, and their uniforms were not particularly well kept. Some of their trousers were hemmed because they had lost their legs in Chechnya, and they would ask passing commuters for spare change. And they did this on the metro platform, and it seemed like there was this vast chasm between the street level and this metro platform. And of course there was, and that was Chechnya. And so I started reading about the Caucasus, about the history of the Russian-Chechen conflict, and became fascinated with these stories of everyday civilians who went to these amazing lengths to retain some vestige of their humanity despite these vast geopolitical forces that might otherwise strip them of it. And I, for maybe 3 or 4 years, I was just reading these history books and journalistic accounts, and eventually I tried to find a novel that was set there, that had been written over the course of the last several decades. And there were none that were available in English. I know because I checked here. And so the idea for the book really came from trying to write the kind of book that I wanted to read that wasn't there yet. I say that I didn't know Carla very well at all, but in a sense I think I did, from being part of this community and for coming here these many years. Whenever I go to a new person's house, I find that one of the first things I do is I look on their bookshelves, partially to see what they're reading. Is 50 Shades of Grey sort of tucked between Capital and whatever else people are reading now. But also I think it's because you can get to know a person surprisingly well by what's on their bookshelf. And so while I didn't know I didn't know Carla well personally, I feel like I have gotten to know her by what's on these bookshelves, and it's just a real honor to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony. I want to thank Bruce Guthrie for taking all these pictures. He's Politics and Prose historic photographer, a photographer of record, and very appreciated, Bruce. I want to introduce John Gompertz, who's going to introduce David Finkel for the Nonfiction Award. John is an old friend and colleague for over 30 years. He's an inveterate reader, and that's why he's on the jury. And he's a promoter of books and ideas, and he knows how to match people with change. And he's been in government. He's run the National Service Corps. He's now the president and CEO of America's Promise, the Alliance for Youth. John was here the day the store opened, talking to Carla and Barbara, and he has his own relationship with Carla, and he has his own relationship with Barbara, and I'm sure he will have his own relationship with Brad and Lissa and everyone else here at the store. He is, for all practical purposes, never left. John?
Well, it's a huge honor to be involved in giving this first Carla Cohen literary prize, I have to say, and fun to see all these supporters of the bookstore and friends here. As has been alluded to, Carla was, let us say, famous for her opinions, correct? And her opinionatedness. So in my experience, I had many conversations with Carla where she said, I must read this book or I must not read this book. Somebody who's supposedly selling you books and telling you no, that's not right. So in my experience, Carla was always pushing books that were beautiful, original, and important. That's sort of what was in my mind, and I think in our minds as we considered the first and second pieces of nonfiction as a jury with Darcy and with Rick. And I have to say, we read a lot of extraordinary, commendable, and easily recommendable books. I want to mention a few of the books, the really notable books that we all read as we thought about this prize. We read The Billionaire's Apprentice, we read Spark, we read The Roberts Court, we read The Alchemist, we read Cool Gray City of Love, and we read an extraordinary book called The World's Strongest Librarian. It was a marvelous experience and a great array of great books. And all that said, in thinking about the one book that Carla might thrust into our hands and say, you must read because it is beautiful, it is original, and it is important, we all landed on David Finkel's book, Thank You for Your Service. Our fellow judge, Rick Atkinson, who's not a bad author himself, it seems, called Thank You for Your Service a bleak, brilliant, and haunting book. And a friend of mine who is now leading a foundation that is specifically focused on the experiences of young people who've gone to war maybe many, many times and are now trying to reintegrate into society, he said that Thank You for Your Service is a critical effort to close the civilian-military divide. All in all, I think this is a book, I think we all believe this is a book that meets and clears Carla's standard of being beautifully written, an original approach. We've heard, I think we've all heard about reporters who embed with battalions when people are fighting. I don't think we've ever heard before of a reporter who has embedded with families of returnees and with those returnees. And it is important for tackling a story that really has to be a concern for every American citizen right now. So for all this, we are delighted to be able to present to David Finkel the first Carla Cohen Literary Prize for Nonfiction for Thank You for Your Service.
David gets a certificate too, in addition to the money. This is drawn from words of Rick's and Darcy's and John's. Each of them contributed something in the way they wrote about Thank You for Your Service. David Finkel's Thank You for Your Service reaches the precincts of fine literature. It is a meticulous account of the struggles of returning veterans from wars in 21st century Iraq and Afghanistan. Their problems, PTSD, marital strife, suicide, devastating physical wounds, illuminate the cost to these soldiers and their spouses and children. In bleak, haunting, and beautiful language that John quoted, David Finkel has convinced the men and women to let us into their lives. We learn that we have asked too much of them.
Thank you, David and John and all of you for coming. So, you know, I don't really know a writer who is ever confident that he's written something good or worthwhile. On the other hand, now this book has been awarded a Carla Cohen Literary Prize, so I urge all of you to buy multiple copies of this book. So I think in the few minutes I have, instead of talking about the book, I hope it'll speak for itself. I'd rather talk quickly about kind of my complicated relationship with Washington that gets me to this moment. My mother, she grew up here in Washington, and then she got married, she moved away, marriage didn't work out, and she needed a place to return to. And so now she has 3 kids, and she came back in a rather tender state to the place she grew up. And not in Washington exactly this time, but she found kind of an old crummy townhouse near Wheaton Plaza, and that's where I spent 4 or 5 years. And you know, there's this old line about the number one tool. What's the most important tool for a writer to have? And somebody's answer to that was an unhappy childhood. And mine wasn't unhappy, but it was a childhood in which I spent a lot of time reading and writing, and this is the place where I learned to become a serious reader, and I had relatives giving me serious books, and I don't know, I got older, and I took this on as a profession, a type of journalism that involves intimate storytelling. And, you know, fast forward to the point many years later where I worked up the audacity to think that maybe I could write a book. And I had an idea, and then I came into this bookstore, as I do sometimes, and it's always a humbling experience, and here are all these books, you know. It's like 3 hurdles to get past. So the first thing is you walk in the store and you see all the books, and then I could imagine the one I would write, and maybe it would be an inch thick. And I'm not looking at covers. I'm just looking at how easily a book can get lost in a place like this. So that's the first step. And then in the distance is this rather formative figure. And I'm thinking, okay, not only do I have to write a book that might be on a shelf here, but it needs to earn her approval. And that's pretty daunting. And then came the third step, which is if it's good enough, it gets in the store, it earns her approval, and then I get to stand up at a podium and talk about the book while this figure is perhaps sitting nearby in a chair listening. And this is really daunting. And, you know, I don't know if you all remember the film Good Will Hunting, but there's a thing in that film where at the end it kind of rises to this moment where Robin Williams in this forgiving tone says to, I guess it was Matt Damon, it's not your fault. I could imagine a version of that where I'm reading and she's sitting there and she's shaking her head and she's saying, it's not your fault. And it's a totally different thing. So anyway, look, the fact that the book I wrote has found a place in the store, and has led to this is quite profound, and I couldn't be more humbled by it and appreciative. And I'm a writer, I'm a reader. Stories obviously matter to me. I think the stories in this book matter. I hope you think it's the same thing. But, you know, there's another version of storytelling. It's the thing we all do. Stories are what we do to make sense of our lives. And so there's a third version where, you know, I tell stories to myself to make sense of the life I'm leading. And now one of the stories I get to tell myself is the story of this day. And that's a lovely thing. So thank you.
One of the things that is important is to look ahead. And before we close, I would like you to hear from my granddaughter, Georgia, who has a story to tell, and who every week I pretty much sing a song that some people here know from generation to generation. So this is from generation to generation. Georgia, you're on. And maybe you can stand on this chair so you can handle the mic, or bring it down so you can. She's good with the mic.
Well, my grandmother would always come to my house and visit me once every 3 months, around that, and she would bring me a book. She would always bring me the same present, a book. And she brought me The Giving Tree, and she would bring me mermaid books because I loved those. I loved Ariel, so she brought me that. And she would read them to me on the couch. And she would tell me how I felt about them after. She would say, "Oh, Georgia, did you like this book? Did you like this book?" And I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. And I'm not going to lie, some of the books were boring. But I just liked having her read to me. And one day, I think it was in the 1st grade, she brought me a book called Jewel Box Ballerinas. And I really, really liked it. And it was about this lady who had 2 of everything. And one day she went to this small corner shop, and it was a jewelry store, and she saw 2 little jewel boxes. And they had ballerinas on top of them, and she bought 2 of them. So she leaves them, I think, in a store, and all of a sudden she gets really sad and depressed. And they resemble children, and she has no happiness. And then the jewel box ballerinas come to life and make their way back to them. Not very realistic, but it was a good book. Anyway, after that, after she passed away, my mom would still read the book to me every single night. And then I would read it to myself, and then read it again, and then put it down, and then fall asleep. But I really, really liked that book, and to this day I still have it, and I read it a lot. And I really, really like that book so much. And it reminds me of her every time I pick it up. And I wish she could come back and read to me again. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. We have now completed this occasion. We'll be back again next year at some appropriate time. I certainly hope that you keep a date in September open for the 30th anniversary celebration of Politics and Prose. A community store that creates public space, that stands for ideas, that believes in the quality of literature and books. It's here, and it's here to stay. Thank you, and Tony and David will be sitting here signing books. So we can just stand around and line up, and they will be happy to sign your books. Thank you all for being here.